Women who have had sex with men whose penises were either too large or too small, share your experiences. During sex with a partner who had a large penis, it wasn't pleasant, probably because of the adrenaline. But after sex, I felt double the pain, as if Chuck Norris had kicked me in the crotch. I had a displacement of my intrauterine device because of a guy with a huge penis. I was in agony from the pain. I had to visit a doctor to make sure he hadn't perforated my uterus. It was a far from pleasant experience. Sometimes it's cool when the size is above average, especially in certain positions, but only until it hits the cervix. I hooked up a couple of times with a guy whose penis was about the size of my index finger. We only had oral sex, but damn, it felt like someone was sticking a finger in my mouth to make me gag. I had to ask him to stop in the heat of the moment. The desire vanishes when you're afraid of getting hurt. We were both in our early 20s. He was very attractive, but it was his first time. Soon after our attempt, he started dating a woman who knew how to handle that size, 26 centimeters. And, according to Facebook, they're still together after 10 years. I don't know if what we had can even be called sex. He looked at me with a worried face and asked, "Are you okay?" seeing my frightened expression. It's nice to look at something like that, but in practice, it's scary to deal with. My colleague told me about how she slept with a guy whose penis was almost the size of a TV remote. Just imagine that. She said she touched it with reverence, like Indiana Jones touching a golden idol in an ancient temple. For the experience, she shook it, and it made a sound like a water-filled balloon. It was so distinct and obvious that she wouldn't have been surprised if it had spoken or sung a song. In the end, she cautiously asked the guy what exactly he planned to do with it. She had to disappoint him. I lost my virginity to a guy who had a 22-centimeter penis. He was the embodiment of the false belief that if a guy has a big penis, he's good in bed. There was no foreplay. He just thrust it in until he finished. He made one feeble attempt to find my clitoris but failed. All I remember is the unbearable pain from him hitting my cervix with his penis. He thought that since he had such a big one, he didn't need to try hard. He didn't give me a chance to prepare for the process. Although I usually enjoy rough sex, he thought that repeatedly ramming my vagina with his penis was great sex. In the end, I started feeling resentment and anger because there was no foreplay, and he was jumping on me like it was the last day of his life. But this was anger in a bad way, not the kind that's good for sex. My uterus was cursing me until he got off me. I was with a guy who was a bit lacking in that department. I slipped my hand into his pants and discovered that his erect penis was smaller than my finger. When he entered me, I felt nothing. Similar to what others have written, I was with a guy whose penis was the size of a large bottle. Our bodies merged, and he must have hit my cervix too many times because I started passing out from the pain. When I came to, I decided to go to the bathroom. I don't even remember why. It felt like I was walking quickly, but it turned out he was practically carrying me down a 5-meter hallway because I was out of it and could have bumped into the wall. I didn't even notice he was following me. My roommate came out of her room and saw me nearly unconscious on the bathroom floor. My boyfriend was panicking, trying to bring me back to my senses. It was 1 a.m. Eventually, I came to and started insistently asking him to bring me my nightlight. He couldn't understand what I wanted. "Bring me my nightlight, bring me my nightlight." I was desperately covering my chest and other areas with my hands, trying to make him understand what I meant. I wanted him to bring my nightgown, though in my right mind, I'd never call it a nightlight. I was so out of it. The shortest relationship I had was with a guy who had the largest penis I'd ever seen. I don't know the exact size, but it was very thick and long. At first, we had to use a vibrator because it was thinner to prepare my vagina for his penis to avoid pain. At the time, I thought I was good with him, but now I'm with a guy I want to spend my life with, and I realized that sex with that guy wasn't actually that great. Although my current boyfriend also has a fairly large penis, so I'm lucky. I'm a girl, and my husband had a small penis, but it didn't matter. Everything was great with him, and oral sex was much easier. A few years ago, I became a widow and started dating a guy with a long and fairly thick penis. For a long time, he had to be extremely careful, or it was very painful for me. He wasn't as attentive as my late husband, so sex with him wasn't as good overall. Anal sex was a real torture. I constantly tried to help myself with my hand, but both these extreme situations brought me a lot of pleasure. I loved them, the rest wasn't as important. One guy I dated for quite a while out of respect, I won't go into details, had a rather small penis. I'm bad at estimating sizes by eye, but it was definitely below average. We could try all positions because some were too short for him. We tried as hard as we could, but it didn't bring me to orgasm. Still, I felt good with him. He often performed cunnilingus. When he decided he didn't want to do it anymore, everything went downhill. I also had a friend with whom I occasionally slept. He had a very large penis. He didn't bring me to orgasm either, but I felt really good with him because of his size. It was real acrobatics. He thought that since he had a big penis, he didn't have to perform cunnilingus. I'll never agree with that mindset. I decided not to see him anymore. A large size has its pros and cons. You have to want it 150% so that there's enough lubrication, and pray he's not too stamina-driven in that regard. Otherwise, it's hard to maintain enough lubrication, and your muscles get very tired. If you're not in the mood, nothing good will come of it. Don't do it with a big one if you're not sufficiently aroused. Anal sex became a curse for me. I used to love it, but now I hate it. You can forget about anal. Be prepared to endure pain the next day and flinch from cramps when you sit down. A small size has its pros and cons too. I felt almost nothing, but he compensated for the lack of size with enthusiasm and effort. When he managed to make me feel something, it was good, and size didn't matter. I enjoyed every second, just like he did. Oral sex was much easier to do, so he thought I was a sex goddess. He couldn't reach the spot that gives me special pleasure. Sometimes I really want him to be able to, but I stay with this guy regardless. One guy had a penis literally shaped like a cone, very thick at the base and too thin at the tip. When I think back on it, I realize it was the worst sex of my life. But I was young and naive, I just wanted to try having sex with a penis shaped like an ice cream cone. I've experienced both extremes. Too large felt like being kicked in the crotch over and over. The guy just didn't understand what he was doing. I can say for sure that even during childbirth, I didn't feel such pain in my cervix area. So, big sizes didn't work out for me. A small one was actually great. The advantage of that guy I slept with was that his penis was relatively thick, and he knew how to work with it. The penetration wasn't as deep, but it hardly mattered. He did it at an angle to stimulate my clitoris, and it felt great. I've had both. The guy with the big one apparently didn't know that women don't like feeling like dolphins being harpooned. Or it was all too fast, you could take your time and use lube if needed. Lube isn't just for anal. I don't mind dealing with fairly large ones, but if they hit the cervix, I'm out of the game. I'm a plus-size woman, so when I dealt with a small penis, it felt like he was just rubbing against my clitoris. I didn't even feel penetration. But he was persistent and lasted much longer than guys with big ones. Plus, he was more attentive to me and used toys and other things. Guys with larger penises usually only think about satisfying themselves quickly and skip the foreplay phase. I had sex with a guy who had a huge penis. It was simultaneously the most boring and most painful experience of my life. He was a pretty big guy, so when so much blood went to his erection, it was like he got drunk. Basically, he just lay there while I tried to somehow fit that giant cannon inside me. After 10 minutes of unsuccessful attempts, I gave up, and he cried. I also had sex with a guy with a small penis. I could only feel it in certain positions. He was very sensitive about his penis, so he rejected some of my suggestions. It didn't last long. I met a guy on Tinder, and we agreed to hook up. During our chats, he kept bragging about how big he was and how he'd screw me so hard I wouldn't be able to walk, and so on. I couldn't wait to meet him. When we met, he pulled it out, and I swear it was 8 centimeters, no more. He must have guessed from my expression because he started apologizing for his size. I tried to convince him it was fine. I don't mind, but even the condom was too big for him. Honestly, it was the worst sex of my life. I felt nothing. He finished in 1 or 2 minutes and left me aroused and angry. Now I feel a bit awkward because I freaked out when I left, and he immediately blocked me. When I told my friends about it, one of them pointed out that while I didn't get lucky, it must have been even worse for him. Just don't brag beforehand and then disappoint. It was like he didn't even enter me. I slept with a virgin who had a micropenis. He cried at the end. It was so awkward, and I didn't feel anything. I was with a guy who had a small penis, as others described. I felt nothing, like he was just rubbing against my thighs. We were young and only knew the simplest positions. Now, I just ask him to try harder because, regardless of size, you can have a lot of fun with foreplay in various aids. I think many men would be thrilled if women told them how to make it good for them. It would be helpful for both sides. He was a good person and attentive. We ended up breaking up because we couldn't maintain a long-distance relationship. I don't regret being with him. I'd never laugh at a guy because of the size of his hose. Men should be judged not by the size of their penis but by their desire to give love and be sincere. Edited to answer some commenters' questions. It was very small, almost micro, so believe me, I was completely sincere when I wrote this. In every other way, he was ideal, funny, caring, reliable. We were together for a long time and only broke up because we lived in different states at such a young age. We didn't have much money to travel back and forth. This was a long time ago, 14 or 15 years ago. To those who say I'm lying and it's impossible to be in a relationship without full-fledged sex, I can only say that's your opinion based on your experience. I had a different experience. Please believe what you want, but don't try to make me believe it. One girl once told me that limousines look impressive but aren't that pleasant to ride in, and they're hard to park. A regular sedan doesn't look as good, but it's much more fun to drive, and it can park anywhere. I asked her, what about hatchbacks? From everything I've read, I've concluded that the best option is when he has a fairly large penis but thinks it's small. Then he'll compensate for his small size with cunnilingus. That's my conclusion, and you won't change my mind. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss new, super exciting discussions. In the meantime, we suggest checking out our other videos.